Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm Media Network. We are your hosts, Kanaye and Josh, and we got big breaking news coming out this morning on Tuesday, May 19th. RJ Lewis, former G League player with the Boston Celtics in the Maine Red Claws, he's announced that he's returning to college basketball to play for Will Wade and the LSU Tigers for the 26-27 campaign. We got a lot of thoughts that we want to kind of discuss regarding this big breaking news announcement that came out in the college basketball sphere just this morning. But before we do that, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Court Storm, we've partnered with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer. Whether you're someone who's an active gym goer or someone who just needs to stay energized in their day-to-day life, Phorm has the products that you need. If you're interested in seeing some of the best fitness apparel and supplements in the game, we'll be plugging the link to their full website in the description box below. And as always, just be sure to engage with the videos on the channel in any way you can, like and subscribing, or just telling other people about what we do here at the Court Storm. Everything goes a long way with influencing the algorithm on YouTube, getting more people to see what we put out. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you first as someone who does root for the St. John's Red Storm. How do you feel about your former Big East Player of the Year announcing his return to college basketball and suiting up for LSU?
I think the whole thing, I don't think bullshitting describes how how bad this is, because we're pushing the window. We pushed it last year with Charles Bediako, with James Naji, all these other guys that were coming from the G League or got drafted and never played the NBA. We had discussions of Amari Bailey, who was on a 10-day contract that played in the NBA, looking into playing another year. Luckily, that didn't happen. Luckily, Bediako left. Luckily, Naji never made up to anything at Baylor. But this kind of pushes the edge a little too far. And that's saying a lot, because Will Wade just spent $5 million recruiting a 26-year-old who was drafted 47th overall in the 2020 draft class. The same one that Anthony Edwards was drafted in, by the way. The guy who's made two actually, conference finals in the NBA. This pushes a limit, and as a St. John's fan, I understand the story of RJ Lewis. One Big East Player of the Year got benched against Arkansas in a just really bad upset loss. I get there was beef between him and Patino afterwards, which caused him to go into the portal, but he could have stayed in, got recruited, or came back to St. John's even. There was more than enough money to help him out, and he would have made that team even greater than it was last year. But he decides to stick with the draft. Doesn't get drafted at all, which I understand that one as well. No offense to him. And he ends up just sitting around the G League. So he wants to get back into the sport. And there was a lawsuit that does have to go in play. He does need to sue to get this to properly work, but he has a year of eligibility. He was only a junior. So he'll likely get that additional year, and the fact that he was only out for a year makes it pretty easy for him to work his way back in. The whole moral of the story here is this kind of draws a line. And I was worried this was going to happen. I mean, me and I have talked off recording about, guys like RJ Lewis that still had eligibility that could have came back. I mean, Bediako ended up doing that for Lewis, but it got to a point very quickly here, in my opinion, where we're getting to a region where I don't even know if we can call it college basketball anymore. This doesn't make any sense.
Right. I mean, this is the first G League player that really is going to have a substantial impact coming in. Of course, you can make your argument for Dink Pate over at Providence, but we've seen RJ Lewis at the college level. We know what he can do. We've mentioned several times in this video already that he was the Big East Player of the Year in the 24-25 season. He was a second team or third team All-American. I forget off the top of my head.
I think he was
just
third.
An incredible player. He averaged over 18 points a game and 7 rebounds in his final season with St. John's. And you mentioned he was only a junior following that season. He's going to be a senior eligibility-wise going into this next season, but who's to say with the 5-for-5 rule, could he get another year on top of that? And I think a lot of it falls on RJ Lewis himself and his representation. I understand. If you wanted to move on from St. John's following that benching in the second-round game against Arkansas, fine. But ultimately, you chose to enter the draft and stay in it when Kentucky really desperately wanted you to come to Lexington, where you would have been the focal point of what could have been a really, really good Kentucky team had they landed you. And I think he would have fit a lot better into the mix as a big scoring wing with a lot of defensive upside compared to what Kentucky ultimately brought into their last year's roster. And I just think, again, RJ Lewis made the wrong decision in choosing to stay in the draft. He obviously went undrafted. He was cut by the Celtics following the preseason. And I'm honestly not all too sure how he performed at the G League level, but it's very clear that he wants to go back to college to maybe get another opportunity at being drafted this time around. So he's ending up at LSU. I would assume he likely will probably be their go-to guy. Of course, there was a long period of time in the portal process where Will Wade only had one player on his roster for next season. But since then, he's brought in Abdi Bashir Jr., who I think is really going to light it up. One of the most efficient three-point shooters you'll find across the country. Mohamed Diabate from Kentucky, who I really like as well. And Divine Ugochukwu, who should be in a much bigger role as opposed to the one he found himself in with Michigan State and Tom Izzo this past season. Getting RJ Lewis, I just see how Will Wade continues to fill out the rest of his roster with these international players he's recruiting from overseas. So this should probably end up being a preseason top 25 team.
No, I won't deny that at all. This team, this is not to fully hate on Will Wade. I like at least the college players he brought in. Divine Ugochukwu was great at Michigan State. I've always been a big fan of Abdi Bashir. He's a 40% three-point shooter. He's going to be awesome in the SEC. And then Diabate definitely deserves a second chance at life. Like, this is the ethical ability of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Will Wade here. Bringing in, now, I guess, a G-Leaguer, a 26-year-old, and an international prospect with dubious eligibility. Like, we're pushing boundaries that don't need to be pushed here. And I get it if you're trying to build a team of straight international guys, as Will Wade put it very recently, but I don't like it. I really, really don't like it at all because he's opening up a door that's not going to get shut. Like, if you could do that, and this is not to put it on anybody else because, we saw Nate Oates do it and everyone called him out, and then we're going to get Will Wade doing it. We've already had Brian Hodgson do it. McMillan brought a near 20 point per game Westchester Nick G League guy. No one's talking about it all. G Leaguers will unfortunately be a part of the cycle, the same way the international prospects are. It gets to a point though when a G Leaguer or a guy like RJ Lewis becomes the face of college basketball. Like if RJ Lewis is able to win SEC Player of the Year or get on a second or third team again, we need to have a real and serious talk, even more serious than now, about fully shutting the door, or at least trying to, on having G Leaguers or outside influence in college basketball, because that is a third or second team or a Player of the Year position that is being taken away from a pure college basketball player who decided to not go into the NBA, who decided to keep their eligibility alive, who decided to do everything they needed to do to be here. Like, I understand to an extent international prospects coming in, maybe they didn't have the scenario to do with their freshman year and they're coming now. The G Leaguers have never made sense to me, and this is the least sensible, least reasonable, and least morally correct thing that I've seen so far in college basketball. And beyond being a St. John's fan, this makes me so mad. This really, really annoys me because it should never have nothing of this should have been considered. I hope the lawsuit fails beyond anything else. I know it probably won't. And there's going to be like 3 or 4 other guys just like RJ Lewis that are going to be wanting to come back in here. And it's going to completely ruin the sport if it occurs.
Yeah, I really, really love the point that you made about what happens when a G Leaguer becomes a face of the sport. RJ Lewis, I mean, we've talked about already. He's a former Conference Player of the Year in the Big East. He was an All-American his final season in St. John's. There's a real world where he ends up being a first-team All-American this year. And if he's one of the main guys of the 26-27 season of college basketball, what does that say about the purity of the sport? I've always stood pretty firm on my belief that no professional player over the age of 19 should have any college eligibility. And that's obviously the complete opposite of the case RJ Lewis and a lot of these other G League guys find themselves in right now. I think it goes back to a lot of the main points we've talked about for weeks now with just how the under-recruited and lower-level freshmen are the ones who suffer the most here because they're going to get playing time taken away. They're not going to get the opportunities that other players will because they choose to return from professional basketball back into college. It's just not fair to those guys. It's not fair, as you mentioned, to the guys who stick around with the program for 3, maybe 4 years and play out a full college career at one school. They get those opportunities taken away when they get recruited over by bringing in people from the professional ranks. So I don't think it's right for the sport. I don't like the direction the NCAA is moving in regarding G League eligibility. And I think there needs to be a lot more firm rules in place. Knowing the NCAA, we probably won't see that anytime soon, but it's going to get out of hand because once you let one through, which we've seen now, and once you let the caliber of a player like an RJ Lewis through, it's going to bringing a whole new world of problems and just eligibility questions that we're going to see likely very soon.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing on that in particular. I think this not only puts down the underranked freshmen, the other talked about transfers. I think this pushes down the higher ranked freshmen as well, because you're taking a role from, if once again, if RG Lewis gets a third or second team All American or is on first team SEC, that's a freshman role. There's a good chance that a freshman will be taking a spot like that, or a freshman staying their sophomore year at a program, or like some good player that could have went to the NBA that decided to stick around, and that role is now being replaced by just some guy who should have left a while ago or made the wrong decision and is now costing other people their careers, I should say, and their legacy at schools for their his own gain. And then that's not to put Lewis in devil horns here, but that's reaching a point where we're gonna have guys more than just Lewis that can take from even the highest level, the highest ranking in college basketball. And I think that will be the biggest talking point here, because when the underranked 4-star, 3-star freshman gets trampled on by a transfer or an international prospect, no one talks about it because it's not a big deal. When the 5-star recruit gets his second team taken away from him by a G leaguer, that's getting to the point. It would be like if an international prospect won Player of the Year last year over Kevin Boozer. Like, it would be a huge talking point in the way that we've never seen before, because we've never seen an international prospect win Player of the Year, and I don't think it's going to happen for a bit. I still think that we're going to see like good freshmen, good sophomores, good juniors, good seniors that have played all 4 years or however many years in college basketball for winning a thing of like that. But I don't think I can say that anymore. I don't know if I can say that for an international prospect, because sooner rather than later, we're going to have a scenario, maybe next year, maybe 5 years down the line, if this isn't stopped, where, a G Leaguer could win a National Player of the Year when that's something being taken away from a guy, an 18-year-old kid who was so highly touted, went to a great school, did everything that he needs to do to get it, and could have been drafted like number 1 overall if he won that Player of the Year. And instead, we're just in this world where that never happened purely because some G Leaguer thought it was the right idea to hedge their bets and go back in when they should have done that 2 years or 3 years ago, never did what they did. Like, the mistakes can pile up too much.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't like the direction college basketball is moving in regarding eligibility. Of course, the 5-for-5 stuff passed very recently. And, RG Lewis coming back, he's going to be a big-time addition for LSU and Will Wade, man. They should be pretty competitive next year in the SEC and in the national landscape overall. But I think that's going to take care of all of our thoughts immediately just on the announcement that RJ Lewis is going to be heading to LSU to play in the 26-20 season of college basketball there. But until the next episode, we'll see you all next time.